some of the partners that are here this week. These programs are also supported by the Environmental and Natural Resources Trust Fund, as well as the National Park Foundation. Before we begin, I wanted to give our listeners a sense of some of the areas we'll be addressing today and talking about. The Boundary Waters are in the traditional homelands of the Anishinaabe people and are near Grand Portage and Bois Forte bands of Ojibwe. And this area is all within the 1854 treaty area, which protects hunting and gathering and fishing rights for these bands, as well as the Fond du Lac band. We'll learn more about these areas today with our presenters, and who are Travis Novitsky and Carl Gawboy. Travis is an Ojibwe artist who specializes in night sky photography. You'll see many of his examples of photography today in the presentation. He is a member of the Grand Portage band. Carl is an Ojibwe artist, author, and storyteller. His art ranges from paintings, watercolors, drawings, and more. You'll see examples of Carl's art today as well. And he is a member of the Bois Forte band. We are thrilled to have them both here with us today to talk about the night sky and the depictions of Ojibwe constellations that we can see in the Boundary Waters. So I will turn things over to, one more thing before I do. So today we're going to be all in this meeting together. So we're going to ask that you keep yourself on mute, and if you have questions, they can be sent to the hosts and we will address them with our presenters at the end if time allows. And we're really thrilled to have them here today. Before we start, I did want to invite folks, if you'd like to turn on your camera for a brief moment, maybe give a wave, see who we have here today. I know we have a lot of folks joining from all over. So if you'd like to say hello, we always really appreciate that. See some classrooms tuning in. That's awesome. Hello. Very cool. Great. So glad to see you all here. At this time, I'll invite you to turn your cameras off, make sure that they're on mute, and I will turn things over to Travis and Carl. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Allison. Let's see if we can get this going the right way again. Share my screen. I might need you to tell me if this is showing up the right way like we did earlier.
Yep, it looks good. We can see the title slide.
Okay. So, Carl, as the elder of the two of us presenters today, would you like to introduce yourself first, or would you like me to go first?
Go ahead, introduce yourself first. I'll introduce myself right after.
Okay, sounds good. Boujou and Dinawema Gani Dug Anin Travis and Disney Kaz Makwa and Dudam Gitchi Onigaming in Dunjaba. So my greeting there, what I said was, hello, all of my relatives. My name is Travis, and I am Bear Clan, and I come from Grand Portage. And for those of you that may not know, the Grand Portage Anishinaabe Nation is an Indian reservation at the very northeast tip of Minnesota. It's bordered by Lake Superior to the east and the south, Ontario, Canada to the north, the Boundary Waters Canoe Area, and Superior National Forest to the west. And the Bois Forte Reservation, where Carl is from, is on the western side of the Boundary Waters. So this whole area between Bois Forte and Grand Portage, it has some of the most dramatic terrain to be found in Minnesota. We've got rugged mountains, beautiful inland lakes, wild rivers, dense forest, and some of the darkest night skies to be found anywhere. And I've been a photographer for most of my life, and for most of the time that I've been a photographer, my favorite subject by far has been the night sky. The night sky for me is something very special. As much as I love photographing it, even more than that, I love the simple act of just experiencing it and appreciating it. I also love the water. Water connects the earth and the sky in more ways than one. It's connected visually when you see the Milky Way or the Aurora Borealis reflected in a lake or in a river, but also physically as moisture evaporates into the sky, then later comes back down as rain. Photography, the night sky, and water are my most, as I like to say, they're my most important anchors. They are things that help keep me centered and balanced. And when I'm standing or laying underneath the glow of the Milky Way, bathing in that magical starlight, that's when I feel the most relaxed and at peace. And my hope is that through my photography, my passion for the night sky will inspire others to explore the stars, either for the first time or to deepen their already existing relationship with them. And so I've been working on a number of projects over the past couple of years, but the most exciting by far has been a dark sky documentary called Northern Nights, Starry Skies. And this was co-produced by PBS North in Duluth and Hamline University's Center for Global Environmental Education. The documentary celebrates star bright skies, dark sky places, indigenous star knowledge, and our stewardship of the night sky. And we'll be showing a few clips from the film tonight as part of or this afternoon as part of our presentation. And for me, even though I grew up on a reservation, indigenous star knowledge has been hard to come by. There just aren't that many people, at least here in my local community, that seem to know a whole lot about it. So it's been quite an education and quite an honor getting to know Carl, as he has shared some of what he's learned over his lifetime of putting some of these pieces of star knowledge together. And so I'll turn it over to Carl now to give himself an introduction. It's all yours, Carl.
Okay. Hi. Hello, everyone. I'm Carl Gawboy, and I was raised in Ely, Minnesota, about 20 miles from the Hegman Lake Pictographs. And I've been to Hegman Lake many times. And during the 1960s and 1970s, there was all kinds of people who theorized about what the pictographs mean, but no one could actually explain them. And my father, who knew quite a bit about Ojibwe history and culture, couldn't explain them either. It's known through archaeology that the pictographs were done up until the 1850s. And then after the 1850s, there was no more new pictographs added to those 200 or so that we find in northern Minnesota, parts of Canada, all the way up to Hudson's Bay. And so one day, one night, I woke up in the middle of the night and I said, oh my gosh, they're constellations. And so I hurried out to look at them because living in Ely, you can get there. You can get to the Hegman Lake pictographs in a few hours. And then I started gazing at the night sky. And I got to be very intimate with the night sky and trying to find the images from the pictographs in the night sky. And my goodness, I found them. I have to say that I talked to a lot of people, a lot of Indian people about it. And they were very, very supportive of my theorizing. And one told me that getting connected with the night sky and Ojibwe tradition is like getting reacquainted with an old friend. So I'm very excited about it. I didn't invent this. Now I want to remind you. What I did was connect things together. So I connected Ojibwe art, which is the pictographs, Ojibwe storytelling, the legends, which often have a celestial connection, and the pictographs themselves. And so connecting them together really worked. And so this is what I want to talk about today.
Miigwech, Carl, thank you. Next, we'll show you about a 3-minute clip from the Northern Nights Starry Skies documentary.
Everywhere you have these great big cliffs, these vertical cliffs that come down to the water. There are about 200 sites of pictographs between northern Minnesota and Hudson's Bay. And the ones at Hegman Lake are absolutely beautiful. The colors are clear. They're 3 big visual images. And over the years, there've been all kinds of people who wrote about pictographs. They always talked about them as mysterious, something from the past, but we don't know what they are. How do you climb inside the brain of someone who lived 300 years ago? And I must have gone to that site about a dozen times over the years, from high school on all the way till a few years ago. I made sketches and I took photographs of the site. And I kept working over these images over and over again, trying to piece them together. But I didn't realize then that I had to think like a scientist and not an artist. And that was a big leap for me.
Yeah.
And when I did that, that's when things started to go together. Who are the people that met there and said, well, this is what we have to remember, and this is what we have to teach. And this is the way we're going to remember it, by putting these images on the rocks. The winter maker, great panther, and a great moose figure. So that we see the image of the rocks, we see the constellation, and then there's the prophecy, the prediction, the story that goes with it. Traditions that extend all throughout Ojibwe lore that go with it. So rather than just looking at the pictographs themselves as art. And I was tempted to do that because I'm an artist looking at the pictographs. And I said, well, this is the work of my ancestors. It's like being reunited with an old friend. All this knowledge is there. You're going to say the moose isn't important to Ojibwe culture. It's central to Ojibwe culture. The winter maker, we live 6 months of winter here in this part of the world. It's very, very important. So there's all kinds of stories about either the great moose or the winter maker, and the great panther, the spirit of the water, and the spirit of spring, the dangerous part of spring, the floods. The Hegman Lake site is not only the clearest site, the most photogenic. That is, a picture that you take of it, it's always real clear and bright. But it's the greatest collection of the visual images of the panther, the moose, and the winter maker figure. There's a lot there. There's still to be interpreted.
All right. So, Carl, you've already kind of talked about your efforts to understand the connections between the pictographs, cultural stories, and Ojibwe constellations. Can you maybe tell us a little more about how these star stories kind of interweave cultural wisdom, traditions, and sometimes moral advice?
Sure. Talking about this great image here of the Hegman Lake pictographs, should remember that the paintings are on a sheer rock cliff, but it's not smooth. The rock cliff is bumpy. And so the Hegman Lake artist did the silhouettes and then rubbed parts of the interiors clear. And you can see them here. Look at the moose figure. There are two white dots in the middle of the body of the moose. And this wonderful moose is kind of squarish because moose bodies are kind of square. They're a very hefty animal. And these two stars that mark the heart are set at an angle to the square. Do you notice that? And then in the Wintermaker figure itself, there's an area rubbed clean where the heart is. And it's not very clear in this photograph, but in each hand, there's an area wiped clean where it makes you can see the rock underneath. So not only is the heart marked out, but in case of the Wintermaker, the hands have a little white dot right in the middle. And that's when I realized when we were looking at the Wintermaker figure, the constellation Orion, that these big outstretched arms reach to the star Procyon, and the other hand reaches to Aldebaran. So
Yeah, we haven't done that. So we don't understand it as much.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. So
I think you can,
I don't think it was a question, Carl. I think somebody just came off mute.
oh,
without-
okay.
Without
All right.
maybe meaning to.
Okay. And then on this picture, see that big X that's way up on the top of the screen slide? That's the brightest star in the night sky when the Wintermaker is in full view. And that's that big bright star that's right up in the middle of the sky. It's not the North Star. That's what I thought at first. But if you go up to the shoulder of Orion and go, and when you're out sky watching, and go up over the shoulder of Orion, and then raise your head, and right overhead is about the brightest star in the night sky. And because I'm getting old, I can't remember the name of that star, but it's there. You'll see it.
So here we've
The-
got a star map with some of your illustrations on it, Carl.
That's right. You'll see on the left side the Wintermaker, the constellation Orion, and you see the big outstretched arms going to Procyon and Aldebaran, and then look down at the bottom in the Moose constellation is the constellation Pegasus. The great square of Pegasus makes the square body of the Moose. And there are stars that mark the front legs and the hind legs. The bell of the Moose, this fur and fat that hangs down from the throat of the Moose. It's there in the night sky. You can see the stars that mark that. Then going over to the other side, on the right side, the figure of Nanabuju, which you can appear only in summer. You can see only in summer. It's a constellation of Scorpius. And do you see that circle around there? Those are wolf tracks, because for the Ojibwe, they mark the path of the moon and the planets, which always keep to the same path in the night sky. And they called it the wolf trail because the stars, the planets, I should say, don't obey the rules that the stars do. The planets move through the constellations as the year goes on, and they follow this path. And the same with the moon. The moon, because our solar system is arranged in a kind of a flat plane, so that from the Earth's point of view, the planets move independently from the constellations. Like wolves. Wolves take their own path and make their own way through the night sky. So on this star map, the wolf trail marks the path of the planets.
So going back to the moose a little bit here, I want to share a story, a couple of stories about moose encounters that I've had. And in the clip that we saw a few moments ago, you mentioned that the moose is central to Ojibwe culture. And moose, they are sort of this, to everybody, kind of an icon of the Northwoods. And just about everybody that visits northern Minnesota, when you ask them what they want to see, they almost all say, well, I want to see a moose. It's like the number one animal I want to see. And over the years, I've been lucky enough to have had, some memorable encounters with them, being that there's a lot of moose up here in northern Minnesota. And this photo here is one such moment where, as I was paddling down the Pigeon River, I came around a bend, and here was this beautiful cow and calf just grazing right along the riverbank. And as soon as I saw them, I stopped paddling and I grabbed my camera. And as I drifted by, I was kind of, gliding past. They watched me. Their ears kind of went forward, like they were listening. They could see me and hear me. And as I drifted by, I took a series of maybe 4 or 5 images, just kind of went click, click, click as I went by. And because it was in the evening and I was moving, the light wasn't real good. Only one picture came out sharp, and that's this one here. The rest were all blurry. And so that moment was mostly luck. I just happened to be there right when the moose were there. But other encounters have required more deliberate planning and action. And such as the time a few years ago when my friend Paul and I went moose calling up near Eagle Mountain, which is the highest elevation location in Minnesota. And the best time to call for moose is first thing in the morning in the fall. And the location that Paul wanted to go to was about 30 to 40 minutes inland from the town of Grand Marais. So this meant I had to get up a few hours before sunrise in order to have enough time to get ready, drive down to Grand Marais to meet Paul, and then drive inland to this series of logging cuts where Paul had been seeing a lot of signs of moose activity. And we got there just as daylight was beginning to creep into the sky. It was a really foggy morning, as you can see here. And we went to this first location that Paul had scoped out, and we called for over an hour, and we didn't see any sign of any moose. And Paul had told me that in his experience, if you don't see a moose in the first hour, you're probably not going to see one at all. So after that first hour, we were pretty much resigned to the fact that the day was probably a bust as far as moose sightings were concerned. So we drove up into the next logging cut where I wanted to get out and take some pictures. And Paul said, well, I'm going to get out and just keep practicing with my moose call, just for the practice. I really doubt that we're going to see anything. So I wandered off toward this big stand of pine trees to take some pictures. And just a few minutes later, as Paul was practicing his calls, I looked towards the big trees and I saw the silhouette of a moose at the base of the trees. And I'm not sure if you guys can see my pointer on your screen, but he's right in the middle down here towards the bottom. And I looked towards Paul, and in my best, I guess I'd say loud whisper, I said, Paul. He turned toward me and he's like, what? Just loud. And I said, there's a moose over there. Huh? There's a moose over there. And then he looked, and right away, of course, he saw the moose. And at that moment, probably because he heard us, the moose turned and he looked right at us. We looked at each other, Paul and I, and then we looked back at the car, which was a couple 100 feet away. And we both just knew that, we nodded at each other and understood us. We needed to walk as slowly and quietly as we could to make our way back to my Jeep. And once we were by the vehicle, we set up our tripods and started watching this moose. And he very slowly kept approaching, but he never seemed aggressive, just kind of curious. And he would walk a little bit closer, then stop and look around for a moment, then walk another 50 feet or so, then stop and look around again. And every time he stopped, he was kind of in this perfect position for some really nice photos. We both swore that he knew he was being photographed and was posing for us. So he got to within maybe 100 feet or so of us, and then he turned and walked off into the woods. It was one of the coolest moose experiences that either of us had ever had. And the fog made for some pretty unforgettable photographs. Neither of us could believe how lucky we were to have shared that moment, those moments that morning with such a majestic animal. And so going back to Carl's illustrations, here's a little more detail of the moose. And of course, as I mentioned, autumn is sort of the time of the moose when they are most active and most aggressive as they look for a mate. And the moose, as Carl mentioned, of course, is represented in those Hegman Lake pictographs. And so, Carl, is there a cultural story maybe that can be shared associated with the moose?
Well, the great thing about the moose constellation is that it's a fall constellation. When moose are getting more powerful, as you say, they're getting more aggressive, they're getting bold. And so as the moose constellation rises in October and November, moose out in nature are getting more aggressive. Then what happens in midwinter is that the moose start getting weaker, they lose their beautiful antlers, and as the constellation starts to slide into the west, moose are at their most vulnerable. They're at their weakest, and they've lost all that wonderful fat from the fall, and they really struggle. And then so for the Ojibwe, a rising constellation means that it's gaining power. A sinking constellation, sinking into the west, means that it's losing power. So what works in the sky works also on the land, so that there's this marvelous connection between what's happening in the sky and what's happening on the land. On this picture here, notice that the bell of the moose, you saw it in that beautiful picture just previously here to this, the bell of the moose with is actually marked by 2 stars. The overhanging snout of the moose is marked by an oval of stars. The square body you could see beautifully in that previous picture, with the 2 heart stars. Do you remember the Hegman Lake pictograph where he rubbed clear where the heart stars? Well, those 2 stars are there, and astronomers have given them names of Tau Pegasi and Omega Pegasi, referring to the brightness of the stars in the constellation Pegasus. And they are the heart stars of the great moose. This is a collection of drawings that I did. The uses of moose hide and the number of purposes that they serve. Moose hide is best for snowshoe lacings, better than deer, because the deer hide tends to give a little bit when it gets wet. Moose hide is very, very tough. Perfect for snowshoes. Here in the middle of the picture is a wonderful glove decorated with moose hair embroidery, and it shows all the marvelous things that the Ojibwe people made with parts of the moose. A moose hide dress, work to moose hide is as soft as velvet, and this luxurious clothes came from the moose. And not so much for the Ojibwe. And look down at that picture below there is the moose hide canoe. If a group of hunters were off well away from their home village and got their moose, they could make a boat out of the hides and stitch them together to carry the moose back to their home village. Now, I have to say that the Athabascans were more famous for doing something like this than the Ojibwe were, but I would suspect that the Ojibwe were able to pull this off too, that they knew about it and they probably did it. This moose hunting, when the moose is at its most fat and at its most healthy and at its most aggressive, is in the fall of the year, in the 1st of November. And the water is very dangerous. As the water starts to freeze up, birch bark canoes are kind of at risk. So, but a moose hide canoe can bounce off ice and rocks, carrying the moose meat back to the village.
Thank you, Carl. And here we have an illustration done by William Wilson, who is an Ojibwe artist, and along with Carl, I believe one of the founders of the Native Skywatchers group, correct?
Right.
Um,
And you see William here has the stars marked out, the great square of Pegasus, the bell of the fur hanging down from the throat,
whoops,
the
sorry about that.
the antlers here, and then there are actually stars that mark the front leg and the back leg of the moose constellation. Oh, and then he also painted in here the heart of the moose. Do you see that there? So that William paints in the style of the Canadian Ojibwe, and they're called the legend painters, or the Algonquin legend painters of Canada. And it's just one of the mysteries to me that the Canadian artists all paint this way, and the Minnesota Ojibwe paint in all kinds of different styles. So I don't know why that is. Same culture, same language, same tradition, but a completely different way of contemporary painting.
And as we transition from this illustration into the next actual photograph that I took, you can kind of see the orientation of how the moose is looking upwards here. And you see the great square of the body of the moose. You'll see that here in the sky as well, to the upper right of the photo.
Yes, a marvelous photograph. Now see that square of the brighter stars? In astronomy, it's called the Great Square of Pegasus, and sometimes it's called the Autumn Square. So for the Ojibwe to look at that as the great moose, the great square body of the moose, and then do you see where the heart would be? There are two fairly bright stars against the fainter stars of the background. Those are the two stars that are on the Hegman Lake pictographs. Isn't that just marvelous? Now, the artist who did the Hegman Lake pictographs rubbed those two stars clear, so there's no mistake that you're looking at a constellation and you're looking at this constellation. What a story. So in the fall of the year, when you're looking up at the great moose constellation, look for those two stars that mark the heart.
Yeah. Okay. Gonna jump just for a moment here over to a few Aurora photos. And I keep losing my pointer. There it is. So the Aurora Borealis, or Northern Lights, the night sky being my favorite subject to photograph, amongst night sky subjects like Milky Way, moonlight, lightning, things like that. The Northern Lights are my favorite night sky subject. And a belief among the Ojibwe people is that the lights are the spirits of our ancestors, kind of dancing in the sky. But scientifically, the patterns of the lights kind of move in cycles, like almost everything, or pretty much everything in nature goes in cycles. So there's periods over the years of maximum activity and minimum activity, and this is kind of referred to as solar minimum and solar maximum. And over the past couple of years, we've been in this like deepest part of solar minimum. And what that means is that aurora events have been, few and far between. But this last summer, we've kind of been, or summer 2022, we started to come out of solar minimum. And that meant we started to see some better aurora events than we had seen previously for the 2 or 3 years leading up to last summer. So this one here was from July 2nd. And this is in Grand Portage, overlooking Lake Superior. And I had gone down there that night to capture the Milky Way, which is to the south. So I had my back to the north. And after a while, I was looking at my pictures and I could see that the rocks along the shoreline had kind of this weird kind of color to them. So when I zoomed in on my camera, like I noticed it was green. So I turned around like, where's that light coming from? And I looked and oh my gosh, like the aurora was just going nuts behind me. And then on September 4th, we had another really amazing display that started about 9 or 10 p.m. and went all through the night until at least 4 in the morning. And between about 2 and 3 is when the lights were at their brightest and had their best shape and structure. And it just went nuts. Like this ribbon that you see here was kind of waving through the sky like this, which is real common when you get that arc or those arcs in the sky. And then out of that ribbon were these pillars shooting up vertically, and those kind of wiggle through the sky. Sorry, my cat is trying to jump on my lap here. So you got all kinds of stuff going on when you see what's portrayed in an image like this. Like there's a lot of movement, there's a lot of color, and it's just an incredible thing to witness. And that same night, so as I mentioned, this is early in September 4th. So around 3 o'clock in the morning, or between 3 and 5, let's say, you can see Orion up here on the right. You see the main part of Orion right here. And he starts coming up, early in the fall. And as Carl mentioned, constellations kind of, as they're rising, they gain power. So maybe, Carl, if you would tell us a little more about Wintermaker.
Yes, in about the 1st of November, there's a very dramatic rising of Orion. And the first thing that you notice is the belt stars, the 3 stars that are in a straight line that mark Orion's belt. And for the Ojibwe, it'd be the Wintermaker Sash. And in the northeast, as you see Orion start to rise up out of off the horizon, those 3 stars are in a straight row, a vertical row, because Orion jumps over the horizon kind of sideways. And in the middle of the winter, he's upright. And then in the spring of the year, as he starts to fade, when winter starts to fade, he kind of tumbles forward on his face. But what's kind of amazing is that those 3 stars in a vertical row are actually marked on the Hegman Lake pictographs. The pictorial figures are the most dramatic at Hegman Lake, but there's some abstract shapes to the side. And one of them are 3 stars marked in a row, a vertical row, and that marks the beginning of wonderful. The beginning of winter, the very first indication that winter's coming. So if you have an elder who's sitting around the fire and telling you about these constellations, and then suddenly everyone sees these 3 vertical stars in a row, he says rightly that get ready, winter's coming because the Wintermaker is here. And Maud Keg, who is from Mille Lacs, wrote a very interesting book called Tales My Grandmother Told Me. And she says, the book is really a great book because it's in Ojibwe. I got to make a plug for this book. It's in Ojibwe and then translated into English. And she starts off with this little paragraph saying, it's cold and the children are tired of winter. And so the parents make toy bows and arrows, and they tell them, go outside and shoot the winter maker. And so the little children go out with their toy bows and arrows and shoot up into the night sky at this great winter maker that's looming in the February sky. And then she says, and sure enough, it warms up. So the winter maker defeated by little children. Isn't that wonderful? And after that, in March, the winter maker tilts forward into the west. So I want to do a painting of it. And so a trapping family moving out onto the ice, the little kids with their toy bows and arrows shooting up into the night sky.
It's a great painting, Carl.
Yeah, thanks.
And here we have another of William Wilson's illustrations showing the winter maker, and I'll kind of again have oriented this so you can see the fade into an actual photograph of winter maker.
Yeah, and the Williams painting is up against an actual photograph of the night sky. So you can see the 3 stars that mark a sash, the 2 stars that mark a shoulders, the Aldebaran over on the right in this picture, and Procyon on the left.
And here we can see them. The 3 sash stars are right here.
Right.
Can you see my mouse pointer? And then the outstretched arms or hands go way out here.
Yep.
Or is it
Very
this
nice.
one? Yeah.
Very nice photograph.
And here's another one where it's a little easier to see.
Yeah, the main stars of Orion are a little brighter.
Yeah.
And you can see his sash, the winter maker sash, the 2 bright hands outstretched.
Okay, so let's move on to Boujou, the great panther.
Yep.
So where the tail of Boujou or the great panther is the head from the constellation Leo.
Right.
The head is the head from the constellation Hydra. Yeah.
Yep. And it's a big sickle of stars. It's almost unmistakable. And it's a spring constellation. You start noticing it in March, and then April and May, it's high in the sky. And the head of the great panther is the head of Hydra, the constellation of Hydra. It's a little trapezoidal shape, real bright stars that make a perfect head of the great panther. And the great panther is always tilted forward. Its hind legs are taller and the front legs are kind of small. So he's kind of always tilted forward as he moves through the night sky. And of course, that's how real panthers are. Real panthers are an attack predator. Their shoulders are real tough, and they always tend to be lower down. The hind legs are the pouncing limbs, and they always seem to be taller. Now, in actual practice, of course, the front legs and the back legs are the same height, but the way the panther always crouches, ready to pounce, the hind legs always seem to be taller. Now, I've never seen a panther in the wild, but I've seen a lot of pictures and a lot of wildlife documentaries, and they always carry their tail in a curve. They're always curved. And the hind legs are always upright and ready, and the front legs are muscular and down, ready to pounce and grab their prey. So the stars just work out just nicely with for the way real panthers are. But the great panther is associated with water, and what happens in the spring? Snow gets wet and moist, and thus it becomes dangerous. The ice starts to break and becomes dangerous to walk on. The floods make water dangerous to walk. So all winter long, you can walk on the ice like it's a pavement. In the spring, you got to watch it. And it's the panther that's depicted as a water being. And canoes would form a semicircle when they would offer gifts to the great panther to keep them safe from harm, because the great panther is dangerous. And the panthers in nature don't particularly care for water. So I always used to wonder, well, why is the great panther always is a water spirit and associated with water? And one of the people that I talked to, one of the Indian folks, and this young lad was about 16 when he told me this. And he said, well, of course, it's a spring constellation. Spring means water. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's right. So I tell this story because I just want people to know that it's not all me. I talked to a lot of people about this, and there's a lot of people who contributed insights into my putting all this together.
Let's see. So here we can see him in the sky here.
Yep.
It-
William again.
Tilted forward, yeah, like you were saying. Unfortunately, I do not have a photograph of this constellation. It's something I have not been able to get a good photograph of, and so I'm making it a mission to try to get some photos in the future. So now I would like to show another quick clip from the documentary, and this is about the Milky Way, or the River of Souls.
For the Ojibwe, the Milky Way is the River of Souls, or further west where there's more pathways over the landscape than there is water routes, they call it the Path of Souls, where you'd walk it. But in this part of the country, it would be the river. And what a beautiful river it is, just brilliant, shining. One time I asked my dad, I said, what's Ojibwe heaven like? And he said, it's the greatest place in the world. It's just like here. And I said, you mean like with winter? And he said, yeah, it's just like here. I said, mosquitoes? Mosquitoes? He said, yes, it's just like here. What could be better? So I'm thinking it'd be the Ojibwe who think of heaven as just the greatest place in the world. It's just like here, just like here. If you lived an evil life, though, you disappear into the cosmos and you're gone. There's no afterworld for you. When the Ojibwe talked about a person dying and going to the afterworld, you travel that river of souls. And the Milky Way has a band of beautiful light coming down to the horizon. And then there's another branch of it that forks off and then disappears. And people who've lived and done evil in their life took that other branch and would just disappear into the cosmos. But those that lived a good and proper life would continue on their journey to the afterworld, where they came to a land of forests and prairies, full of game and full of all the ancestors that have died, went on before you get reunited with them.
And here's a photo that I made of the Milky Way, and this kind of illustrates that connection too with the sky and the earth. Like I love that reflection. That's one of my favorite things to try to portray, is how it just comes down and ties the two together. Any other comments besides the video, Carl, that you'd like to make about the Milky Way? Or
Oh, these photographs are just great. I'm just swimming in them.
thanks.
So yeah, this is just a beautiful photograph. The shining river that goes down to the horizon. Oh, there's another.
And maybe we should check in with Allison. We're almost up on our hour. Let's see, we probably got another 10 minutes worth of stuff. Is that okay, or do you want us to kind of jump ahead?
I think that's just fine if that's okay with you guys. And
Yeah.
if folks need to drop out, they can, but just so
Okay.
we'll have this all as a recording to send everybody as well.
Okay. So next we will talk about a constellation visible to us in the summer, and that's Nana boujou, or Scorpio. And Nana boujou, of course, is a prominent figure in Ojibwe culture. Carl, could you tell us a little about his importance?
Yeah, one thing that was kind of amazing about this constellation is that his sash is trailing behind him, and he's got a bow, and a lot of Nana boujou stories tell about his skill with a bow. One of the things that Nana boujou did in Ojibwe tradition is to clear the land of all these monstrous animals that actually threatened human society. And with his bow, he was able to clear the land, and giant beavers and giant moose. And one of the things about this, of course, is that after the Ice Age, there were giant animals in North America. And it would have been almost impossible for human beings to live when there were short-faced bears and saber-toothed tigers. And there was even a giant beaver that was probably 200 pounds and stood about 4 feet tall at the shoulder. For the Ojibwe, probably saw these fossils just as a modern paleontologist would find them, and talked about these animals and wondered what happened to them. And of course, it was their great cultural hero that must have made the world safe for humankind. So there's a lot of stories about Nana boujou pursuing and chasing giant animals like this one.
And go ahead, Carl.
Oh no, William Wilson again, with Nana boujou and the bow figure. And one of the big stories is that Nana boujou actually almost killed the great panther. So if you look at the star map, you can see the great panther constellation, and you can see Nana boujou chasing after him. So as the year goes on, these two constellations chase each other in almost an endless pursuit. So it just works out so nicely that Nana boujou is aiming his arrow at the great panther that's on the other side of the sky. And I'm looking and looking for at the night sky for the arrow, because boy, sometime I'm going to find it, that floating between those two constellations, a row of stars on a straight line that mark this arrow. It's there somewhere. I'm convinced of it.
And here again, we see it in an actual photograph. We've got, oops, got those stars on the bow here
Yeah, right,
represented here.
right, right.
And this is one of my more surreal night sky photos, I think, because I'm often asked, is this the moon on the left? Well, it certainly looks like it could be, because it's so bright, but that's actually Mars right here. And this is Jupiter over here. And Saturn shows up here too. I'm not sure if it might be this one. It's somewhere in here in the middle of the Milky Way. Pretty cool photo though.
Yeah.
And here's another one where we can see Nana Boujou and the bow here a little bit
Right.
bigger.
Right, and that big bright star Antares is Nana Boujou's heart.
Is that this one?
Yes, that's one, right?
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so the last constellation we'd like to talk about today is one that we're almost all certainly familiar with, and to the Ojibwe, it was known as the Fisher, but most people probably know him as by several other names, Ursa Major, the Great Bear, or perhaps most commonly, the Big Dipper. And fishers really are amazing creatures with incredible agility and prowess. And I've seen them move through the forest as if the forest isn't even there. They climb trees more easily and silently than you can imagine. And while I've seen them now and then over the years, this is the only time I've ever gotten a good photograph of one. And there's a story about how Fisher earned his place in the night sky. And Carl, if you'd be so kind to share a summary of that story with us.
Yes, the Fisher, of course, is a great hunter. And one time he was hunting with his friends and they couldn't find any birds anywhere. And so somebody told Fisher that the birds were all held prisoner up in the sky world by a group of ogres. So Fisher decided to go climb a tall pine tree and jump from the pine tree up to this trapdoor that held the way to the overworld. And as he went into the overworld, he saw all the birds were held prisoner in cages. So he went through, opened up all the cages, opened the trapdoor. All the birds flew down through the trapdoor and down into the world below. And the ogres were so angry at Fisher for liberating the birds, they chased after him with bows and arrows. And Fisher jumped through the trapdoor himself, ran all over Lake Superior, through the Canadian Shield, being pursued by the ogres. And then finally he jumped up into this big pine tree and jumped up into the sky. And one of the ogre's arrows pinned him to the sky. And there he is to this day. Now, even though he's pinned to the night sky, he still has power. And as the Fisher stars rise in the northeast, it's spring. And what happens in the spring is that the birds come back. He still liberates the birds. And as the Fisher stars swing to the west and start to set, the birds fly away. So his influence on the birds is still left. As you look at the Big Dipper, and you can see the outline here in William's painting, in the tail of the Fisher, there's an arrow, and those two stars are there. It was really hard for me to see this because I kept looking at the asterism of the Big Dipper. And I looked and looked and looked, oh, I don't know, for years. And then all of a sudden, there was the arrow, and I saw the two stars. It takes some really looking if you're trained as an astronomer, as a backyard astronomer even, to kind of get your head out of looking at asterisms and the Greek constellations and look at them differently. And once you do, you can't miss it. And I can't look at the Big Dipper anymore without seeing that arrow with the poor fisher still pinned to the sky.
I like that story. Uh, um, and here you can see it again, continuing our trend here of showing an illustration followed by a photograph. Here is Fisher, the Big Dipper,
Right?
and you've got the tail stars up here.
Yep. And there's the arrow right up above this last tail star. There's two stars in a row that mark the arrow where he's pinned to the sky. And then down at the bowl of the Dipper, and move your eye to the left downward at an angle, and you can see the fisher's nose. And that was the name of the stars that the name of the star that the Ojibwe gave to, excuse me, kind of blathering here. The Ojibwe named that star the fisher's nose. And that's that star. You see the bowl of the Big Dipper, and you see that the upper two stars and the lower two stars. Follow them along, let them taper on, and you see that kind of brightish star further down a little bit, further down, right there is the fisher's nose. And this photograph also has a wonderful comet in it. One of our visitors from the outer limits of the solar system. And
Yeah, there's a lot going on here. This is a Perseid meteor.
Yes, yeah.
And of course, we've got Cassiopeia up here, this the W in the sky.
Right.
Yeah. And here's one more that shows Fisher with
Right.
some Aurora, some northern lights.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got one more short video and then we're going to wrap up. To me, water connects the earth and the sky. And a lot of times that's most evident when you're at an inland lake and you see the stars of the Milky Way reflecting in the surface of a nice calm lake. And you're gazing up at the Milky Way, which is just larger than life, it seems. And there's absolutely no wind on those nights. You can see the stars reflecting in the lake, almost a perfect reflection of the sky. No matter what's going on, no matter what kind of difficulty I might be having, I can come to a place like this and just lose myself in it and kind of get lost in the mindfulness of that experience. There's that connection, right? Like you've got the water, which makes its cycle through evaporation, goes up into the atmosphere and comes back down as rain. It's all connected, just like everything in life is connected. And being there in those moments and seeing something that's so far away, and by that I mean the Milky Way, tied to something that's right there in front of you, that water, the surface of that lake, it makes you feel insignificant and kind of large all at the same time.
and part of all of that, part of that energy that ties everything together.
I just think that video is a nice little summary for a night sky presentation. But lastly, Carl, if I can, I'd like to close today by reading a short paragraph. That's kind of I don't know if it's the last thing in your book, Talking Sky, but it's right near the end. So in Carl's book, Talking Sky, he says, or he writes, when you think about it, stars are just stars, but constellations, the star figures, are the imaginary lines drawn between them. And constellations reflect the identity of the people who drew them, their creativity, their imaginations, wisdom, traditions, and science. So trying to put together the Ojibwe night sky, the sky figures, and the stories is a real and important way of understanding, appreciating, and honoring the Ojibwe and their life on the land. And with that, unless there's anything you'd like to add in closing, Carl, we'll say miigwech and thank you everybody for attending today.
Oh, no, I'm fine. I just love your photographs, Travis.
And
I'm
I
just
love your artwork too and your stories. It's
mutual
always,
mutual admiration there.
yeah, it's always fun to hear you share this stuff with us. So miigwech, thank you. And thank you guys for Allison and for Voyageurs Conservancy and Friends of the Bonji Waters.
Yes, thank you.
Today.
Thank you both. This was wonderful. I am really excited that everyone could make it today and that we'll be able to share this out with lots of other classrooms that have signed up for this week. So thank you both so much. This is wonderful.
Mm-hmm. And did you end up with any chat questions or?
You know, I don't see any questions in the chat. Maybe just we'll hold a moment. If anyone does have a question, feel free to put that in the chat. We can take just a couple minutes here if that's okay with you two.
Yeah.
I don't see any coming up. We'll wait just a moment. I had heard, I had seen some images of the Fisher and the Big Dipper, but I never knew about the arrow. So I really enjoyed learning about that today. I'm definitely going to look for that in the sky.
Like Carl said, once you notice these things, it's really hard to unsee them or not see them when you look up. Like, I know for myself, like I used to look at Orion as just Orion, right? The little small part. I didn't know about the outstretched arms. And now that I know that, like, it's impossible to not see it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so obvious now.
Looks like there is a question in the chat. Jenny Ratcliffe is her class is wondering about the Little Dipper, if there is an Ojibwe constellation that goes along with the Little Dipper that you know of.
Yeah, I can go back to, it actually showed it in this one slide right here. It's a loon.
Yeah, it's a it's a loon figure. The when William did this, he made the loon figure just a little bit bigger than it really is. You can see the outline of the Little Dipper there. So the dipper part of the Little Dipper is the head of the loon, and there's a kind of a hunched back, and then a straight line at the bottom. You can see that there, and that's, you can, when the loon is swimming in the water, you can see that straight line. There's a couple of great stories about the loon and his connection with the night sky. The back of the loon is a star pattern. When you think about it, those beautiful white spots against the dark background, that's the night sky. the North Star, which makes the tail of the loon, is the star that doesn't move, of course. That's the North Star, which becomes the direction finder. But from all I've been able to find out, the Ojibwe didn't really find the direction by using the North Star. They knew about it. They knew it was a star that didn't move and that you could kind of count on the direction once you were able to find it in the night sky. But if a hunter was caught out at night, having to get back home, he used the landmarks, trees silhouetted against the starry sky. There's always some light in the night, rather than using the directions. Maritime people used the North Star, and that was real crucial for them. But I can't really find the Ojibwe using the North Star so much as a navigation tool, but I might be wrong on that.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. That's really cool. In the chat, their student Piper says, thank you to their question on the Little Dipper. Awesome. I don't see any other questions, but thank you so much, Miigwech, to you both. This has been amazing.
Yep. Thank you, and you're welcome.
Thank you, and you're welcome as well.
Thanks for joining, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.